Hey guys, we had a discussion today at work about how much it costs to drive an EV versus a gas car, and I think it's a very good question. I have a spreadsheet that I made before I actually went to um, full EV back in 2018. Um, and at that time, it was, kind of a different world. And so I've decided to kind of refresh my logic of what I was doing there. Um, and kind of come up to speed with current pricing and that kind of stuff. One thing I did notice is that I haven't put the price of the fuel, just the MPG of the fuel. So I do need to add the price in here, and maybe I should do that in a different way. Um, so to give you an idea of what I'm doing in this table is I've created a row for a Tesla Model 3 and created a row for Civic, and then created a row for how many miles the line item typically would go before it needs to be changed. So for like an MPG, you run out of fuel. In a Tesla, you get 4 miles per kilowatt hour. In a Civic, you get about 32 miles per gallon. Um, for oil changes, there are no oil changes in a Tesla. We could talk about ATF changes because your automatic transmission fluid that is in the two motors, you should change that every 100,000 miles. People will argue that. That's what I do. So a lot of what I'm doing in this video is what I do, not what somebody else wants to do. And feel free to argue it, right? Boost that video up higher in the charts because people arguing over that kind of stuff. Sounds good. Um, but at least for an oil change for a Civic, all of these prices I just Googled, what's the average cost of an oil change in a Civic? It's $65 if you could do a standard oil, or twice that if you do synthetic. I've always changed my oil every 3,000 miles. People can argue that all day long. You'll get the AMSOIL shills that will come in and say you can go 15,000 miles. Uh, Whatever. I'm going to buy oil from Costco, or not Costco, but Walmart. I'm going to pay $20 or $25 for the 5-quart synthetic oil. I'm going to do it myself with a brand new Honda oil filter. It's going to cost me 30 bucks an oil change, and I do it every 3,000 miles. You can have the AMSOIL guys do whatever they want to do. Um, it's cheap insurance, right? One other thing that I decided to do on this comparison is tires. Yeah, you're going to burn them out way more often in a Tesla than you will in a Civic, but you could drive a Tesla the same way you drive a Civic, and your miles would probably, or sorry, the miles you get out of those tires probably be close to the same. But if you're going to drive that Tesla hard, you're going to, at least for me, I squeal like a piggy every time I hit the gas, or sorry, the warp pedal, and I fly off the line. It's a lot of fun, and yeah, I'm fine with paying 4 tires so I can have that fun. So I'm going to zero that one out. So, maybe I shouldn't. Anybody else can build this exact same spreadsheet in the exact same way, and that's fine, right? Or whatever way they want to. The next thing I went with was brakes. I've got two different Teslas. I got a Model X, Model 3. I had a Model S before that. The Model S I sold at 125,000 miles. Had the original brakes, rotors. Rotors were fine. Brakes were I don't even I know I measured them and they aren't used all that much because instead of braking, you let your foot off the gas, the motor's regenerative brake and it slows you down. And even on that Civic, or sorry, not on the Civic, but on the Model S, um, it doesn't regen brake as well as a Model 3 does. A Model 3 will regen brake all the way to stopping, whereas a Model S you'll regen brake down to about 5 miles per hour and then you need to hit the brakes at that point. That was a rear-wheel drive Model S. That's just my experiences. But that one went 125,000 miles, all original brakes, rotors. The Model 3 came from Hertz. I don't know what Hertz did before I bought the car, um, but the brakes on it when I got it looked fine. I've put another 30,000 miles on that car. Brakes still look fine. Rotors look fine. On the Model X, same thing. The Model X has 129,000 miles. The Civic or the Model 3 has 130,000 miles on it. Both of them brakes look great. And especially on that Model X, it weighs a lot. Like you'd be burning through brakes if you weren't doing regenerative braking. But in my experience, I'm over 100,000 miles on both cars. The brakes look great. So I'm just going to say for a Tesla, you don't have a cost of replacing brakes. Um, and the crazy thing is did the same searching for how much does it cost to do a brake job on a Civic, and it said you have to do them every 35 to 65,000 miles, split the difference. It said 50,000 miles, and it said it was from like 980 bucks or something to 10 or 1,050, which is crazy to me that it costs that much to do brakes. But anyway, that's what it says. Timing belt, that needs to be done every 100,000 miles. It said that, all of these are averages, right? It has a range. So I went with $700 cost every 100,000 miles. Water pump, $600 cost every 100,000 miles. The motor slash battery, I'm going to say, at least based on Googling it, they said that the motor in a Civic lasts between 2 and 300,000 miles. Said the same thing for a battery on a Tesla will last between 2 and 300,000 miles. Hoping that's true. As far as the replacement cost between the two, it is much different. In a Tesla, if you get a new battery from Tesla, it's going to cost, I think it was about $14,000 the last estimate that I saw. But I'm going with you're buying used parts here. So when I search for have a new motor placed inside of a Civic, it said I think it was $3,000 to $6,000, and I went with 4,000. I figure you're gonna probably buy a used motor and have it put in there. Same thing with the battery. You can get used Model 3 batteries for about $6,500. Cost you about $1,000 to get them installed for sorry, not a new motor, but a new battery. And I'm saying I'm going to go on the high point on both of those, say 300,000 miles. Reason why I chose that, I took my 2004 Honda Civic to 200,000 miles. It was running great, wasn't burning any oil because I changed the oil every 3,000 miles with a new filter, right? You treat things well, they last a lot longer. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose the high range on how long those two are going to last. The next one, I searched for how much this cost to change or replace a transmission in a Civic. It said $6,000. How much for a new Tesla motor? $6,000. So both of those are every 200,000 miles. My personal preference is just to leave this out. If the cost is the same and the wear is about the same amount of miles, I think just leave it off. I would argue that the motors in a Model 3 last a lot longer than that. The problem is that there were large drive motors in the early Model S's that had a seal, and that seal would fail and it would let coolant into the motor. That coolant would get to the inverter in the motor and it would fry that inverter out, and then you'd have to replace the whole motor. And on a non-performance, it was $6,000. On a performance, it's $9,000. You can do a coolant delete, it costs 50 bucks for the part, takes a couple hours worth of your time to do it, and then those motors should last a very long time. So I think I'll leave it out for this comparison, but I do think that I am overstating how often a Model 3 electric motor has to be replaced. I don't believe that. But anyway, we'll zero it out and we'll say, it's the same. So we'll just ignore that. Trying to think of anything else between the two. Wiper blades, you're going to replace them about the same amount of time. um, sorry, I was just thinking in my head, like windshield washer fluid, you're going to use that at the same rate. Air fresheners, you're going to be at the same rate. Like what else? What else is a maintenance item in an ICE car that you don't have in an EV? And it's honestly been 6 years since I've driven a gasoline powered car. I mean, I drive we have an old minivan that I drive once or twice a year to go get stuff from Home Depot. But it's not enough to do much. I'm just like an alternator. You have an alternator in a gas car, but you also have a DC to DC inverter in an EV, and both of those probably wear out about the same rate. I would argue that you'd wear out an alternator more often because it's in the front of the car. It has a lot more contaminants that get to it that are gonna corrode the copper wiring. Um, Whereas a DC to DC inverter is actually sealed inside of the car, so it just doesn't get dirty, it doesn't get water, all that kind of contaminants on it that wear it out. So I would say on that one too, you're going to have to replace your alternator more often in a gas car than you're going to have to in an EV. But that one's a little bit harder to justify. For me, I'd change at the same time as the timing belt water pump. I do all three of them. I'll do the serpentine belt, I'll do the timing belt, I'll do the water pump, tensioner pulley, alternator, and all of those at about the same time, and it's $1,500 or something to do it. But I'm going to leave it out, for the sake of argument. Just say, those two are going to wear out about the same time frame. What else is there? Like, could you say that your electric car charger goes out? Maybe. I have the same electric charger for the last 6 years, and it's just a little charger that can sitting out in the garage, and it's put thousands and thousands of kilowatts in all of the vehicles I have, and it's still just trucking along. Yeah, I'm not really coming up again thinking of anything else. All right, so we'll do fuel costs. So for power, and you need to do this for whatever you're paying in your area, but for me, I'm paying 5.2 cents for the power, but that 5.2 cents is when I charge at home and I'm charging off peak. If I charge on peak, it's 25 cents. I don't. But even at the 5.2 cents, I charge probably 75% of my miles is charged at my workplace, and they have EV chargers all over the parking garage at my work, and they have a bunch of solar panels, and so it's a really cool setup. It's like a Leeds building. They have 2,000 solar panels. It's pretty cool. So for gas, I passed a gas station today. Some of them were like 3.25, other ones were 3.50 a gallon. I always put like mid-grade in it, and that 3.25 to 3.50 is low grade. So I'll just say, 3.50 for the gas, and people can change that, if anybody's following along. All right, so now we can do the running costs, right? So maybe we'll move that up a little bit. I just don't want to have everything too smashed together. It's like web design. I have the same problem. It's like, how do you make this thing look better? So we'll get rid of these empty cells, move everything up. All right, so running costs, we'll have on the top, we'll have the Civic, bottom we'll have the Tesla. Now we'll build the formulas, right? And then up here we'll have miles. So we'll say 10,000 miles, and oops, 20,000. Should we do it in 10,000 mile segments? We'll go out. Oh, I don't know. That might. Maybe it's better. Yeah. Yeah, sorry for this. Okay, so we'll say Civic and Tesla, because I like it if, for some reason, looking down at numbers is easier for me than looking across at numbers. I don't know why that is. I think just scrolling to the right for an ascending order of miles versus going down it's just a little bit different. Okay, so we'll say miles, right? Then we'll do 10,000 and then 20,000. I really feel like we should be using bigger numbers than that. we'll go to, I don't think anybody really keeps their cars that long, but we'll go to 400,000 miles. All right, so for the Civic, your costs are going to be, you're going to equal the sum of a couple different numbers, right? So the first one will be, 350. Actually, it'll be the miles divided by the cost divided by the MPG, because that's your cost per mile. Ooh, definitely not that. Yeah, not divided by times. So what I'm doing there is I'm taking 10,000 miles, I'm multiplying 10,000 miles by your cost per mile. And your cost per mile is your cost of the fuel and how far you can get with that fuel. So that to go 1,000 miles or 10,000 miles in a Civic will cost you $1,000, and that's just for fuel. So to do the same thing for the Tesla, you would do the 10,000 miles times your cost per mile. Sorry, divided by 4 miles. So 5.2 cents, 4 miles per. And that, you can already see how big of a difference EVs make, right? And how much cheaper they are. So, same thing. We're doing G4, so the cost of gas, $3.50 a gallon, divided by 32 miles per gallon, times 10,000 miles. It costs you $1,000. When you're at your EV, your cost per mile is 5.2 cents per kilowatt, and you can drive 4 miles per kilowatt. And then to go 10,000 miles times, a penny per mile or so, or 1.3 cents per mile, is going to cost you 13 cents, or $130. Okay, so now we got to go in and add everything else. So that's just our gas costs. Now we need to add our oil change cost. And our oil change cost is, we're going to take our 10,000 miles divided by your 3,000 mile oil change. Need to go and add another print. Oops. Add another print in there, right? So I got to do this math first to get how many oil changes you need for that 10,000 miles, and then times that by $65 per oil change. Right, so that adds, a couple $100 to it. So we have oil changes, now we got to get to brakes. So now let's add the cost of the brakes in there. So our brakes are calculated for every 10,000 miles. You need 0.5 brake changes, right? But anyway, we're doing this at a per mile level, right? So that adds, another $200 because you're a fifth of the way through it. So now we need to add, and I'm doing these one at a time. I'm sorry if this is painful, but I figure it's a little bit easier if we do these one at a time than dumping them all. So that got us our brakes. Now we're going to add our timing belt. So every 10,000 miles, you're going to add 1/10 of a timing belt with the cost of $700. added a little bit to it. So now we're going to do the same thing with our water pump. So our water pump is going to be the same 1/10, so we'll add another $60, right? And then I'm just going to add the next one. Hopefully that's okay with everybody. So the next one is every 10,000 miles, you're going to add 1/30th of a motor/battery change. Okay, so to go 10,000 miles, your true cost of a petroleum car based on brakes, timing belt, water pump, and a new motor, along with your oil changes and gas, is $1,773.75. So now for the Tesla, we've got to go back in and add in all of those other items, right? So all we've calculated so far is our fuel costs, our brakes. In theory, they're going to last forever. So now we'll go and add in, the dreaded new battery cost, which I really hope I don't run into one of those. But we'll say a new battery every 300,000 miles, not divided. We're going to times it by 7,500 bucks. Is that right? 10,000 miles divided by a 300,000 mile change cycle times $7,500. I think what I did last time is I put another print around this so it was easier to see, grouping those equations together. Yep, it's still $380. All right, so now that we have at least the cost that I could come up with, that's what got us to those 2 data points. So now let's take that and extrapolate it down to divide by 0. Oh, I didn't put my dollars. I'm sorry, guys. So we do want to change the 15 because that's our mileage, but the rest of our values we want to keep the same. So we'll put dollars in front of them. Oh, did I really put 65 in here? Bad. There we go. Should not have put, oops. Because that way, if we needed to change those values at all, for the inflation monster. There's probably a better way of doing this. Hopefully somebody will tell me what a better way to make all of the calculated fields static without having to do that. And I'm going to test that before I go do it on the Tesla side. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so same thing. Okay, so let me grab those 2 and I will drag them down. All right, so here you go. So here's your running costs, your cost per mile. So to go 10,000 miles in your Civic, it's going to cost you $1,773. To go that in your Tesla, it's going to cost you $380. And that is including the cost to replace the battery, which is the dreaded point that everybody's fearful of. And if you drive the car, 200,000 miles, it's going to cost you $35,000 in fuel to drive the Civic, or $7,600 in the Tesla. I'd almost like to do this calculation again without taking in the motor battery replacement. Maybe we will do that in a second. All right, and if you go 300,000 miles, it's going to cost you $53,212.50 to drive the Civic, or $11,400 to drive the Tesla. If you take it to 400,000 miles, it's going to cost you $70,950 for the Civic, or $15,200 for the Tesla. Now I can copy those. I don't know. I really want to do it just to see, how much different that is, because if you don't have that battery replacement cost, but I don't know, that's not really realistic. Eventually you're going to have to replace that battery. So there you go. So, everybody's worried about how much it costs to replace a Tesla battery, and, fearful of that as the miles pile on. But, even at, what did I say the mark was? 300,000 miles. Even at 300,000 miles, if that battery fails, that's going to be $11,000 that you're going to have to pay for it, versus you've consumed $53,000 in costs to drive your ICE vehicle, right? For your brakes, timing belt, water pump, gasoline, oil changes. So it's pretty drastic, as you pile the miles onto these vehicles, on how much it actually costs you to run those vehicles. So we can go in, there we go, insert, we can insert what's some recommended charts? Yeah, maybe that's a good chart to use. I'm going to Control Z that one off, and then I'm going to grab this data, and then we'll insert the chart based on that data. Yeah, does that help to see, the comparison of the two? Maybe that's a better way of comparing the two. Except for that looks like almost the inverse, right? Yeah, we'll go with that one. All right, so there you go. Here's your operating cost differences between those two vehicles. And I think it's, pretty self-explanatory on why EVs are so advantageous. And I understand that, people they want to stick with gas and oil changes and all that kind of stuff, but I don't, if you drive it for a while, right, it's quite a difference. And we can, play with these numbers. Let's say, gas goes back to, $2 per gallon of gas. Then your comparison at 300,000 miles, it's a lot less, but it's still, over 3 times more expensive to drive your gas car than it costs to drive your EV, even with the battery replacement. If let's say your power costs, instead of it being 5 cents, you're paying 10 cents. Double the cost of the power at 300,000 miles, it's still, over double that you're going to pay to drive your gas car. The big thing for me is the cost per mile to drive my EV is about what it costs to do an oil change. It really isn't that expensive at all. I don't know how to I just don't. Maybe we'll see $2 gas again. I'm just not sure. But let's go the opposite way. Let's say that we get back to $4 gas. And that's a big advantage of driving an EV, is that with the EV, a lot of these prices of fuel are actually kind of fixed by, regulatory agencies. So at least for me, the cost of the fuel at 5.2 cents, I believe I'm in a contract on that until 2032. So I'll have another, 8 years of fuel at that cost. But yeah, so if gas goes to $4 a gallon to get that same 300,000 miles, it's going to cost you $57,900 to drive your Civic that many miles, or 11,400 to drive an EV. Trying to think of what else I haven't taken into account. Oh, I mean, we could talk about initial vehicle cost. I kind of didn't take that into account. So how much is how much for a new Honda Civic? And I'm gonna say, I mean, there's like LX, and then there is EX, I think. And I'm gonna say an EX is equivalent to a Tesla. Let's get some argument going on, people. All right. Yeah. So even to get into the leather, which, Teslas have vegan leather, but still, you're $30,000. Yeah, I'm gonna go 30,000. I'm just gonna make it a round number because dealer markup fees are gonna want to do VIN etching. They're gonna want to do undercoat spray. They're gonna pressure you on all that crap. Whereas on a Tesla, you don't have any of that undercoating spray. Instead, you have 0% APR. Look at that. So if I'm going to order a Model 3, ooh, okay, so I'm going to go for cash. I'm going to go, let's say, rear wheel drive, it's going to cost the same. So I don't think vehicle, oh, gotta uncheck that. Yeah, so there you go. So there's a big difference. So 42,000 versus the long range at 47,000, but the 47,000 also comes with a $7,500 federal rebate, so it's about 40,000. I know those are going to be expiring more than likely at the end of the year, but for now, 40,000 versus 30,000, so about $10,000 more to get into the Tesla. So for the Tesla math, I'm just going to go in and add that to it. So I'll say plus $10,000. So let's drag that down and see how, I mean, it's just going to add 10,000 to each of those numbers, but we're caring about the chart that we have on the side of the screen there. But it's still, quite considerable. But you'll see initially, right, if you're not driving that Civic, or sorry, the Tesla, greater than 70,000 miles, then the Civic is cheaper. But after you cross, 65,000-ish, somewhere in there, that's when the EV becomes cheaper to drive, which truly that's not all that many miles. But, after 65,000 miles, then it inverts. And then if we go down to the same, if we're saying about 300,000 miles, still costs you less than half, right? So that's $36,000 less, 36,500 less. Ooh. So we'll say, the cost diff, and we'll do, since it's me and I'm a proponent of driving the EV, so I'm going to say, no, I need to do that the opposite, sorry. So I'm going to say, the cost of the Tesla minus the Civic. So at this point, it's, and positive number means that it's costing you more. So maybe I should do it the other way. Maybe that's a better way to do it. Then you have a negative dollar amount on there of saying No, it actually costs you more. Yeah, there you go. So it costs you $8,000 more to drive that Tesla off the lot than it costs you to drive, or sorry, the Model 3 than it does the Tesla. Yeah, there we go. Oh, I should integrate that into the chart. But anyway, so between 60 and 70,000 miles, that's when you turn cash positive on your Tesla. And then if you drive it 100,000 miles, you've saved $5,500. If you drive it 200,000 miles, you've saved $21,000. If you drive it 300,000 miles, you've saved $36,000. If you can drive it 330,000 miles, your Tesla is now free. Based on it costing, $40,000, and it's actually closer to 320,000 miles. But just, think about that for a while, that you drove your Tesla 320,000 miles, and the net effect is, based on you driving a Civic and paying for oil changes, timing belt, water pump, gasoline, that vehicle cost you in operating costs the same as what it would have cost to buy a Tesla in the first place. So your car is effectively free at that point. And so for me, if I go in and say, it's not fair to say that I'm charging 100% at work, but if I was, right, a lot of those costs, even as low as they are, they kind of evaporate. And you have the same thing on the other end. Let's say that all you're doing is supercharging all the time. Then this fuel cost goes way up. In my area, the supercharging costs are about 39 cents per kilowatt. So if you're supercharging all the time, you can still, drive the Tesla for less than an ICE vehicle, but it's going to take you a lot more miles to get there. You're going to have to pass, 145,000 miles before you're cash positive in the Tesla. And you can see in the graph, it just takes you a very long time to get there. And, once you get to 400,000 miles, if all's well, it still would have saved you $18,000. But an interesting thing, like if we go to the supercharging cost, when I was looking at California, I found some in California that were, yeah, right there, 25 cents. I was kind of blown away that it was that cheap in California, because I had heard that people, using Edison or whoever they're using in California, that, people were paying 40 cents a kilowatt, and there were all of these numbers that were way higher. And that's what it's saying right here. That's interesting. Oh, this is saying it's a third less if you charge at home with your level 2 charger. But I don't know. I mean, I don't live in California, so I have no idea what their power costs are. I just hear a lot of fear mongering, right? And according to this, if Google knows what they're talking about, the average cost of a supercharger in California is 25 cents. So let's go down and we will update that to 25 cents. And I don't supercharge very often, so I'm not in the know on what those costs are. I just charge at home all the time. But it's still, about 95,000 miles if you're 100% charging from superchargers when your Tesla becomes cheaper to drive than your Civic. And once you get to 200,000 miles, you've now saved $11,000. When you get to 300,000 miles, you've saved $21,000. And then at 400,000 miles, you've saved $32,000. So that's pretty huge. So if you look at the, I moved away from Teslas. So what was Tesla saying for their fuel costs? So cash. So they were saying a 5-year gas savings of $5,000, which is great, right? But Tesla's lying to you. And why are they lying to you? Because all they're calculating is just MPG. They're not calculating how much does it cost to change the oil, how much does it cost to do the brakes, how much does it cost to do the timing belt, the water pump, right? How much are all of those costs that are embedded in an ICE vehicle that they're not telling you about it. So they're actually understating how much it actually costs to drive a gas vehicle. So when they say, it's a $5,000 savings, um, oh, now I've embedded in the additional cost of the vehicle, so I've kind of muddied that up a little bit. Maybe I'll do it over here. So I'll grab that same calculation, put it over here, and on this one I'll take the, plus 10,000 away, so that we have just the operating costs. What have I done to that? Did something screwy. Oh, because now it's looking at C15 instead of looking at A15. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's go down and see. So it was saying 5 years. If you do an average of 12,000 miles or 10,000 miles per year, right? Let's say it's 10,000 miles, right? So the 5 years would get you to 50,000. Then you're at about $4,000. But if you're closer to 15,000 per year, right? So that would be, 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, right? So if you get down and you're closer to, $6,500 to go that distance. So they're understating your savings by about $1,500 because all they're calculating is just the gas savings. And that, oh, no, because, man, that's bringing in the battery costs. Oh, but I have to do that because I've said the motor. Anyway, I'd have to calculate it totally different to get down to the same level. But yeah, so hopefully that's helpful to somebody. We could go even further down the rabbit hole on other numbers, but yeah, the other thing I'm thinking in my head now is, let's say that you're not calculating the cost of a new motor or a new battery, and instead you're just going off of straight operating costs, and you're going to sell it before you have to replace either of those two. That'll take a lot of the cost out of both of those equations. But anyway, to get back at where I'm at, paying 5.2 cents for my fuel, per kilowatt hour. So for me, it's quite a big difference on how much I'm saving. Yeah, let me do the cost diff again. This one will do without the extra $10,000 for the vehicle costs. Oop. Oh, I gotta move my chart. That's why I can't see it. Yeah, so at 10,000 miles, it's $1,500 less to drive the Tesla. Okay, there we go. All right, so, if we're talking the same 60,000 miles, in fuel operating costs, even bringing in, the cost of a new battery, at 60,000 miles, it's $9,000 less. So, anyway, keep driving that petrol if you want, boys, but my take is it's well worth moving to an EV, at least if you love your wallet. And something else that I'm just going to keep going on these rabbit holes. So if you took this amount of money, let's move our chart over. So let's say, oh, I don't know how to calculate this. Sorry to go silent on you for a second, but what I'm thinking is, so let's say that you took this money and put this money into the stock market, and the stock market did an average of an 8% return per year. Yeah, we can do this. Okay, so we'll say, we'll take the sum of this amount, and we will say that amount times 1.08, meaning the original balance plus an 8% return. Multiply that by this amount of miles divided by 12,000, meaning per year. Is that going to work? So if we have our initial, or our savings, which is going to be $1,500. It's not compounding is the problem. So each of these we're going to do for that amount. How are we going to do the compounding in here? Because all of these are just going to take a single 8% return. Because this is getting us to 1 year. Okay, so this is the year calculation, right? So if you have 10,000 miles and it's doing that times or that divided by 12,000 miles per year. Yeah, so that to go 10,000 miles, that's going to be 0.83 years. And then you have the initial savings, which is the $1,500. Maybe all we have to do here is take that times the 1.08. Because if this is 1 year, 2 year, let's say it's 3 years, but that's going to say it's the 300%. So we'll do 0.08 and then add 1 to it. This is, I don't know, this is janky, but what does that do? Not what I was looking for, because that's saying, you're going to turn your $1,500 investment to $104. Where's the plus 1? Oh, because the plus 1's outside of the equation. Let's go over and let's remove that. No, we're still getting that not done right. There we go. So that'll get us to 1,600. So what if we go all the way down? And I don't know that math's right at all, but okay. So what I'm saying here is if you bought a Tesla or you bought a Civic and you took all of the money that you saved just on the fuel cost difference, right? So you're going to save $1,500 in the first year just on the reduced operating costs of the Tesla over the Civic. Second year, you're going to save $3,100, $4,600, right? So if we take that money and instead of buying Frosties at Wendy's, instead we invested in the stock market, and for that year, we had an 8% return. then that would return after the first year $1,653. To the second year, it'd be you save $3,100, you'd be up to $3,513. If you save $4,650, invested it, you get $5,500. And this is all fuzzy math, right? I'm not saying that this is a reality. But if you did invest it and you had compounding and you had an 8% return, right? So whether that's high or low, in the S&P, I think in the last year, it's returned like 30-something% this year. So 8 seems awfully low for that, but that's on average since, the 1800s or whatever, right? So if you got the same 8% return and you drove your Civic 200,000 miles while you saved $31,000 in fuel, if you invested it, your savings truly would be $72,333. If you were able to drive that car 400,000 miles, you'd save $62,000 in fuel. If you invested that fuel savings, it would turn into $227,333. I should add that to the chart. Anyway, so that's the beauty of compounding, the beauty of saving, and saving early and saving often, right? Get your dollar cost averaging down. But I mean that's kind of outstanding that you'd save that much. So Tesla's number, if we're saying it's $65,000 in fuel savings in the first 5 years, if you invested that money, my calculation is you're closer to $10,000 that you've saved in fuel. And if you invested it, you'd be around, $14,000. $14,000 to $15,000 is what you'd have in your investment account or your investment portfolio from your gas savings. So my advice, buy a Tesla, get on a cheap power plan, and take all the money you used to put into gasoline and instead stick it into an S&P 500 fund and let your savings roll in, and let the coal rollers keep paying what they're paying. Anyway, that's a 52-minute adventure in my head of the kind of things that I think of when I'm going through this kind of stuff. But if that was interesting to you, please let me know. If you see anything I did wrong, also let me know. If you were kind of surprised by those numbers, comment, let me know. If you notice I spelled returns wrong, also let me know. So yeah, that's kind of surprising to me. I'm kind of a little shocked, to be honest with you, on that one. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Let me know. And thanks so much. We'll see you guys on the next one.